Chapter 17. The Conch Ziggurat. Ziggurat, pyramidal stepped temple, tower that is an architectural and religious structure characteristic of the major cities of Mesopotamia, now mainly Iraq, from approximately 2200 until 500 BC. Approximately 25 ziggurats are known, being equally divided among Sumer, Babylonia, and Assyria. That's from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is definitely Britannica. And this cat has just been bugging me all day. Alright, here we go. So what's our first move? Yours? You need to learn to code. Ethan laughed. Okay, what are you getting at? Carl retrieved a Russian, English, and Hebrew Bible from a shelf by the fridge. This is the English King James, the Russian Synodal Bible, and this binder is translations of scripture in Hebrew for all 66 books in the KJV and RSB. Now you can understand all these languages without difficulty. You can't do this back in the real world. We reset. But here you've got options. Read all of Genesis, Revelation, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Get through Daniel and Ezekiel if you can, as well as the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The things I go to do now, you cannot help with. And I must work unencumbered. Where you can help will be later. We have been here approximately 1 hour in the time of this place. That's a month, Ethan. I'll be back in 5 hours, and I'll have real work for you to do. In the meantime, son, you'll need to be spiritually armored. Ideally, you should read the whole scripture. We don't have time. So, read each chapter in each language before moving to the next. The ideal order would be the Gospels, Revelation, Genesis, Daniel, Ezekiel, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. I doubt you will get through all that. It's over 240,000 words 3 times. Try to get to Revelation, Genesis, and at least one of the Gospels. Drink the water as you go. It will clarify your mind, for it is a gestalt of human knowledge. The laws of this world are different, but I can answer any questions for you briefly before I go. Remember, time is of the essence. Okay, what do I eat? Nothing. Have you felt hungry? Laws of entropy do not apply here. But the cat eats. The cat is greedy and needs to be plied, manipulated, you understand. You do not need to eat. The air and water will sustain you. That's why you're hungry and tired when you get back to our world. The old appetite returns. Next question. Ethan got up and looked out the window of the trailer. So I guess I'm not going to have to go to the bathroom. This door, said Carl, grabbing a brass knob on a thin wooden plane beside him, then opening it briefly. It was a wet bathroom where the toilet was in a plastic enclosure under a 70s-style shower head. I've got the wide black water hose going downhill, but please don't get sick or anything. It's a chore to replenish water reservoirs here. There are approximately 20 gallons in the gray tank and 15 in the fridge. Those in the fridge are the ones you drank from. What do I do if the alien demon things? What do I do if they find me? Pray to Christ and stand your ground. Don't let them in. Genesis 6. That's where you find an explanation about what they are. Genesis 6. And where they come from. It's in the New Testament. Sorry, it's in the Old Testament. I already told you of their antediluvian incursion. You will understand it better in text. You'll see it in the cross-section of languages. You will begin to understand. Anyway, they won't find you. They don't even know you're here. This entire realm will not have existed 21 years in real time when God changes the nature of our world as Revelation outlines. A day is a year. A month is 30 years. A year is 360 or thereabouts. Humankind interacting with portals between our world and this place is something that's less than 1,000 years old. Less than 3 years here. The demons are fast, but not omnipotent. They have yet to develop requisite infrastructure to properly police this place, and instead concentrate on their own designs, knowing their time is short. Also, they are not the only ones here. So, pray them away if they come. Under Christ's protection, they will not even know you're here. Not unless you go out and do jumping jacks while insulting them, or something go out like that. On that note, try to refrain from going out. I mean, no argument there, fam. I'm not much of a reader, but I'm sure the Bible won't be as boring as coding textbooks. It definitely is not. Any other questions? Why does the water have information in it? All water does, even in our world. It's just that here in this atmosphere, under these changed rules of time, under these energetic conditions, it affects us differently. It affects transmitted signals too. Of course, smartphones don't work. There are no satellites or cell towers. However, a two-way radio will work. But the more you use, the more it becomes wet as the water condenses around its signal. Eventually, this will render it inert as electrical systems inside are affected. We will likely need to use such radios, so when we do, keep this in mind. Ethan made a frowning expression and said, okay, so you don't really know either. The air is like food. The water brings knowledge, specifically in the linguistic sense. Gravitation is something absent in certain places where the light is strange. There is a great tree across the sea, one that must be miles in height. I saw it, or it's something like it. Was golden and purple. No, in my vision it was all mankind, the tree of humanity. However, I did see a shape like a tree a little while ago when we were returning from the dacha across the sea. That one has root systems which are golden and the root systems which are purple, and they draw from the sea, and at certain points it will grow hundreds of feet in seconds, then remain stationary for long periods of time. The COVID situation, that led to its massive growth. It feeds on the water. The good water goes through the golden roots, the bad water through the purple roots. It is all human knowledge. Massive shifts in human knowledge accordingly affected. I see the guardians coming and going from the tree. I also see the varying pseudo-sacred geometries of the grace coming and going. It's some sort of metaphysical Switzerland. It's a neutral place, but it drinks from the waters that grow or recede based on trends in our world. There is a metaphysical link. What's the point of that? I've been focused on retrieving Genevieve. I have theories. Okay, last question. Why was it all mirrors inside the cylinder? I have not been inside one, but I do know the Baba Yaga dacha was similarly reflective before my parents remodeled it. I suppose there is an energetic relationship that has to do with light, as though the mirrors constrain the light and allow it to be manipulated in a certain way. Anything else? I mean, I don't know if I could remember any more information anyway. I should concentrate on this. And he indicated the Bible texts on the dinette table. I will return. Keep that cat safe. Until we meet again. And Carl left Ethan to his studies. Beyond the canyon where he had hidden the camper, Carl was very careful to be sure he wasn't seen when he left. It was a narrow crevice more than a canyon, a crack in a great green mound that aspired to be a mountain. The going was clear. He made his way up the trail, heading swiftly to a line of trees that was scant but gave on a wider forest. He had a route to the top of the great green hillside. It was about a half-mile's journey. A fraction of that exposed, the rest behind the tree line. There were creatures in there, sometimes great predators who had made their way into a world where no predation was necessary, but the instinct remained. They were very dangerous. What they could catch was a toy until it could no longer be toyed with. This was one of the reasons Carl always had a gun and was glad he had retrieved another from Farley. The underbrush around those trees was lush and fragrant, boasting many colors and expressions. This was an area of the world between worlds that did not bear the stink of the broken interlopers who abducted and abused, but they had indeed captured several areas. The hill's peak provided a sweeping view. About 10 miles distant was the Conch Ziggurat of the Fallen. It towered higher than any man-made skyscraper and had an organic look, despite the electric synthetic reality which truly defined it. Its color was a dark and broken violet hue that was brighter in some places, darker in others, and almost seemed alive from a distance. Even so, it yet retained a metallic veneer. The land all around, started from about halfway down the hillside, was dead. Some areas had become desert. Others were filled with gnarled arboreal carcasses. There was a stench with notes of sulfur in such areas. The tower had a wide sloping plane similar to the opening on a conch shell. It was a straight line from the tip to the wide conical base nearly a mile below. In the open lip of the conch tower, the massive flying cylinders made their entry. They weren't the only shapes either. Pyramidal structures also streamed in. Flying saucers hovered and disappeared. They were loading, unloading, researching, traveling, planning, plotting. They went in at the opening of the mountainous purple conch, high above a foaming body of water that exited its mouth like a chemical river. And then there were bright linear explosions of blue-violet energy from the structure's pointed top. They fired all the way into upper atmosphere, or perhaps beyond. Carl suspected they were shifting dimensionally, and that the power had to do with the tower's insides. It was a spiral of mirrors on the inside of that tower, and there had to be a reason. Some craft never entered into the mile-high purple conch. They would hover around it, briefly following the energy surges, then returning to their circuits. Near the very base, the structure tapered outward, as though it had been built atop a great mound. Around the side of the gargantuan cone from the river, like a tunnel in the mound, was an area that sank into a gentle, dark valley of lifeless dirt. The dark ovoid cavern was an entry point. Great lumbering things would sometimes come and go. Carl had made transit near those tunnels, but had not entered them from without, or gotten close enough to see what manner of contrivance came and went therein. He knew they connected to the dark spaces, with the glowing bugs and the weightless cavern on one of the portal routes. He suspected he had been within that infrastructure before, but it was hard to know. Only the outer tunnels were even remotely familiar to him, and those he hoped might be avoided. Still, if they had to be used. The hill where Carl had chosen to put the safe house of the fifth wheel was steep enough to be out of view of the massive tower, and was only seldom beneath cylinders as they followed their circuits into the tower, then out into energy and back. His foliage camouflage did as intended, and the location of the redoubt on the outside of a sort of crater near a dead sea made it an unlikely spot for incidental discovery. The instances where Genevieve and Chloe, who was Claire, were taken on the far side of that green hill represented anomalous circumstances. Anytime someone came into the world between worlds with dark metaphysical energy, the cylinders would deviate from their course, and that is what had happened in those scenarios, as well as the recent one involving Farley, Buford, and Ethan. When the cylinder had segmented, sending its components back over the sea, they had gone somewhere around that strange place and eventually found their way inside the massive conical ziggurat. The violent, inhuman conglomeration of madness, where what went on Carl only half knew. He'd gotten close enough to learn several very important things, but he did not want to risk losing the opportunity for a rescue attempt. He might only get one shot. This meant he could only operate off his own spotty reconnaissance. He knew where Genevieve was specifically. Routes to get there beyond the interdimensional were a mystery. He gazed a second more at the tower and its wild, circuitous one-way traffic, then made his way down the tree line until he came to a very thin trail that led a good 300 yards into the woods. The foliage all around was still thick and green here. At a certain point, you could see a gaping conifer with a hollow inside that was wide enough to serve as an apartment. It was far in the distance through the trees. Carl threaded his way there and removed a dark, non-reflective cloth he had draped over the entry, an uneven hole about 5 feet wide and high. Inside the hollow were many things, chief among them a bulky object under a blue tarp. Carl pulled the crinkling material back to reveal a 1978 CBX 1000 motorcycle with a cramped little side car. It was in fine condition, but as expected, its tires had lost pressure in the time since he had last been there. Only a matter of weeks in the time of this world, but it was enough. He busied himself restoring them, first stopping to hook up a smartphone-sized battery charger commonly used in jumping cars. It had been on his person since Ethan initially interrupted him with that false redhead. This had been one of the things he needed desperately to get done. After he inflated the tires, he took the tarp and pulled it over the opening in the tree with the black cloth that was already there. A nearby gravity lamp became the area's only illumination. Carl then carefully moved a soundproof partition in front of the tarp and the curtain. He plugged the metal exhaust hose connected to the dual exhausts of the bike into a natural ventilation duct, which had once been a knothole. These measures wouldn't perfectly conceal the sound, but it was good enough you couldn't hear it 20 feet off from the tree, let alone from the path or beyond the trees. His measures were more than adequate. The smoke from the exhaust did tend to billow, though. Carl had put together an extension system of hoses which he painted to match the color of the tree, then the forest floor. This caused the smoke to evacuate far from his location and could be activated from the inside of the tree. There was a fan at the end of the plastic cylinders he rigged together that pulled out the fumes. That bit of engineering had taken him years to get right. He realized he needed to power it off the jump cell he used to wake up the motorcycle's battery, but the motorcycle had to be attended to first. There was an order of operations to his maintenance duties. Carl revved the CBX from its cushioned seat as he turned it on. It seemed to be in good working order, so he disconnected the battery jumper while the engine hummed and used it to power the exhaust fan. His next move was to leave the bike idling about an hour so the alternator could fully charge its battery. Taking a deep breath, Carl was satisfied he couldn't smell fumes. His ventilation system yet worked. In the tree were quite a variety of weapons, which he now put about his person. There were pistols from a variety of eras. Carl preferred a .45 revolver for its size and power. He also had a 9mm, which was basically functional and cheap. There were assorted melee weapons about the premises, and some body armor options. Carl had multiple sets of body armor. He now donned several. Ethan would need protection. The men with black eyes under the control of the Greys would kill if they could, and many of them were armed. But the good news was only a few hundred were in that entire tower, less than 1,000. Most were on ships or in the world doing the bidding of their masters, where they were of more use. Here only a select few remained. The last thing Carl grabbed was an extremely heavy backpack that contained a heroic portion of yeast. They would need a diversion, and Carl had a fine plan for it. Carl made additional preparations that took a few more hours and carefully returned the way he had left from the camper. He only made himself hidden once a cylinder made its way in a straight line for the tower. When Carl got back, it had been approximately 7 hours since the initial abduction of Chloe, who was really Claire, in the time of the strange world. He returned just in time to see something that was a troubling omen. He had come in the door quickly, pulling off one of the vests for Ethan, saying, "How go your studies?" "I have a lot of questions, but it's crazy doing this multi-language thing, fam. You know, like some of these genealogies, they're like hidden verses." "Yes, it is fascinating, isn't it?" "It's wild, fam." Slinky abruptly appeared in front of Ethan on the dinette table. She hadn't come from a portal, just done the general magical appearing act cats are known for. She made a meowing noise and raised her backside in front of Ethan, beginning to purr and knead the table like dough. Ethan went to shoo her, but she just started playing with his hand, then did the same thing with her backside again. "I thought you hated me, cat." "Well, this isn't good," Carl observed. "What's the problem?" "She is in heat. It must be February or March already." "Yes," Ethan said, "but it's only been a few hours for her here too." "The rules are strange in this place. I think the ability to bring life happens cyclically in our world, and that reciprocates here despite time, as life represents a non-temporal variable. It can become eternal, thus transcending that which is merely bound by time. Life, real life, eternal life, has the same relationship to time that oil does to water. That's my theory. Anyway, she'll do that if it's a certain time of year, regardless how long we've been here. She hasn't aged more than a few hours, neither have we, but metaphysically speaking, her life-bearing window is open, and will remain so for several hours." "Wait," Ethan was suddenly concerned. "Does that happen to human women?" "Thankfully, no. No adult human females. They do not experience heat. The demons have to wait for their menstrual cycles. These can be sporadic, but life windows tend to be on the level of years with human women, so an acceleration of natural processes is rare. Knowing this, you will understand better. There is little time for my lady or yours before they will be used as clone factories. In days, or at most a week in the time of this world, Genevieve will be implanted with or by one of those creatures. How long it will take for your lady will depend on how far she was in her cycle when she came through, or whether or not she's physically capable in that way anymore." "Oh, man." Ethan managed to put a surprisingly communicative emphasis on just those two words. "I need to explain this plan to you now, Ethan. How we get them back. He shooed Slinky off the table and sat down, quickly producing the map. The cat ran under the net and started rubbing against his legs aggressively. Carl ignored him. See this curving line to the back of the big conch shell? That's a river. This line coming out near the bottom, that is pure hydrogen peroxide. Whatever happens in that conch ziggurat produces pure hydrogen peroxide. It's a byproduct. Mitochondria does that, Ethan spoke up. What? The powerhouse of the cell, mitochondria. A byproduct of the energy mitochondria produces is hydrogen peroxide. I learned that in chemistry a few years ago. Actually, now I think about it, they kind of look like those cylinders. Hey, is that why you had all those bottles of hydrogen peroxide over by the cat box in the curtain part of the bathroom? Claire, she cut herself. You had all kinds of hydrogen peroxide once I finally found it. What, you're collecting it out of the river? It's one reason. I had to test my plan in this world and our world to get the portions right. Huh. Mitochondria. Ethan, I don't know if I thought about the cylinders and mitochondria. He tapped his fingers on the table, then shook his head. In this backpack, I have many kilograms of yeast. Now, that hydrogen peroxide river, I guess, it comes out of the Conch Ziggurat. You have no idea how huge a structure it truly is, Ethan. Indeed, those cylinders could be smaller than cells in comparison to its massive body. See how I have on the map? See that little dot down there? Yeah, that's my attempted scale. The dot would be you or me. No cap, that thing's the size of Mount Everest, Ethan said. It is huge, acknowledged Carl. What I've done, I've managed to sort of improvise, if you will, an aqueduct. There's a place underground near where that weightless chamber we encountered is. I found my way there with the cat. I have stored a certain amount of soap in one of those cavities, about a ton. Took me 2 weeks of trips with handcarts and Slinky to get it there. My cache of sabotage chemicals has been there years in our time, but only days in theirs. I'm sure it will be discovered any second here. As yet it has not been. So what do I do? Ethan asked. Carl pointed to the map. There are about half a dozen points along the inside of the conch as the spiral opens. One is a soap gate, the rest are strangely portals in a straight line. I haven't been through them all, but the cat found them very easy. Coming into the opening of the conch, you will see them. They can't be missed. They're not small. I need you to open the gate of the aqueduct at this point. This first of 6 hollows, he made a circle with his finger atop the map, and wait in a certain hollow out of sight. My previous plan was to have the cat open a fissure so I could get away, but we'll have to improvise. At any rate, when you get there, you will find a lever. When you pull that lever, it's going to release a sluice gate that will flush over a ton of soap into the hydrogen peroxide right near the mouth of the peroxide river. It moves very slow. It is almost stagnant, really. So it all should pool up right there, but for the reaction. I will have already teleported to several locations, and it will take me several seconds to get into position, from your perspective. From mine, it will be a bit longer. I will contact you via the radio. Here he handed Ethan an old-style walkie-talkie. Now remember, use this very seldom. The radio waves pick up water, and it will soak the unit. We can only talk on here at most 2 minutes in this world. We've got to use them quick, and only when we need them. Why do you even have these? I have a lot of things I don't need. I've been planning and scrapping plans for years. This one, I would have needed to set up more automation, and owing to recent events, now I'm not going to get to it. So you're going to fill the gap. In a certain way, you might actually help me out better than if I had realized my previous plans. What I'm going to do, I'm going to signal you. You're going to release the valve and signal me the precise instant it is all the way open. I'll need to travel with the cat to another nexus point where I will drop the yeast. The bag of yeast I've got now is enough to initiate a chain reaction that should, if I've put this together right, result in a quick and remarkable accumulation of foam as your soap intersects it from up the hydrogen peroxide river. This is going to cause a huge inhibition of light coming in the open plane of the conch and being bent by the mirrors. I have a solar sensor here. Carl indicated a point on the conch ziggurat further along the spiral. Any fluctuation under the constant level of light that filters through the open end of the conch will cause it to release several tons of yeast, provided the battery isn't dead. It shouldn't be. It's supposed to last 300 years, and by my reckoning, it's only in place 50 hours of weird world time. When the sensor is triggered and the yeast is released, the result should be a continuous reaction developing into several cubic miles of foam. By the time the reaction has worn itself out enough to seriously inhibit all light coming into those mirrors. I've tested reactivity here, this chemical relationship. It does hold up somehow. In fact, it may be stronger. What's it going to do now? Just blow the place up? Carl shook his head. No, I initially planned something like that, but I realized it would kill the innocents they have enslaved on the inside. No, through many years, I've uncovered the chamber where Genevieve and indeed all the new women are kept. It's a great sphere that incrementally advances the women until they can be absorbed into the larger sphere where they become like components in a machine. The evil ones impregnate them at the proper time during their cycles with non-human, you might say, fallen DNA. The first sphere advances them to that time, then in transit, they segue to gestation as they become absorbed into the primary unit. Male human DNA is not used in the process. The children that are born are often deformed and strange, but every now and again one is produced that look vaguely human and can be used for their purposes. To use explosives would be to kill the innocent hypnotized women and any other humans I don't know about in that tower. But what I have found is the tower itself is endlessly mirrored on the inside. That's what I was talking about with the light earlier. Yeah, I wasn't totally following you. Have you heard of Kozyrev mirror? No. It's a mirror arranged like a spiral to bend light, condensing it in a certain way that has a direct effect on time and space and therefore gravitation. This conch is a massive Kozyrev mirror. Well, it's not quite a Kozyrev mirror. They are purely cylindrical, they do not taper at the top. But in places of the massive structure, it is properly proportioned for such purpose. Fam, you think that's why the cylinder ships are like that, all reflective on the inside? Carl shrugged. Could be. What I know is such mirrors, they funnel light around the spiral form until it becomes its purest energy, and at relay points along the way, varying applications of this energy are used by the demons. And what comes out of the end of this tower at its very top, this is beyond me. I know they are steadily building energy, and that there is some communication with populations of these creatures at the edge of reality, at the edge of all existence. They are building some sort of army, I suppose. They use human males and the fear they have to grow their grey embodiment, and this gives them a toehold in reality. Otherwise, the green energy that represents them is sucked to some vast point at the edge of all things. Maybe it is hell, or a holding area, I don't know. What I do know is the green energy is used inside the grey suits, which appear to be aliens as the suits are entirely organic. Those green slime suits control human beings, compelling them into hypnosis. Once the fear has been drained from them in the fullest sense, leaving a hysterical brain-wiped husk, they use that husk as Buford was. But there are those which are born of their spiritual genetic makeup and human DNA, which are much stronger, yet different. They walk among us, and we don't even realize it. That's, no cap, pretty creepy, Ethan observed. It certainly is creepy. So my plan is to turn out the lights. When the time is right, I'm going to drop a sort of yeast bomb in the peroxide and soap. And it's going to initiate an absolutely massive, continuously compounding chemical reaction that should fill the tower with foam. Sounds like elephant toothpaste to me. Yes, I believe that is what they are calling this reaction today. You've seen baking soda and vinegar make a reaction. This is similar. It does generate heat. Once you have signaled me, you need to run to a particular point. I will be there with the cat and Genevieve in seconds. The beauty of this diversion is, It does not have to work completely, just enough to stop the light bending properties of the mirrored spiral. I will do this, and then I will work with the cat to retrieve Genevieve and leave to a motorcycle I have prepared for this time, on which I will transport her back to this very safe house and then to the portal that will return us to the house and trail. I'll grab you on the way to the bike. You're going to do all this on your own, huh? As I said, I needed to prepare more automation so I could control the release of elements. With you, I can do it manually through these walkie-talkies. Carl showed Ethan the cumbersome units, then zipped them back in his pack and readjusted it on his shoulders. Ethan nodded. Fine, but what do we do about Claire? Who? Chloe. Her real name is Claire, the one I'm trying to save. Yes, well, I'm not exactly sure, Ethan. We gotta get her too. It would be nice if we could save all the women in that chamber, but I don't know that it's possible. It is in the heart of the Conch Ziggurat, and the entire reason we need such a massive diversion, one potentially crippling infrastructure. We're going into the Queen's chamber of the beehive, Ethan. This is like a beehive keeper uses smoke to confuse the bees. How do you know it's going to work? My parents work on the dacha. It was a cozy rev mirror before. I only read their words about it. Before the mirrors were covered, if light coming through the passage of the spiral's open arm, the house came alive. I don't know what they mean by that. This is what I read. When they covered the light, put on wood trim and the rest, the reaction ceased. The house is no longer alive. This tower of these entities, it is the same. I know it. Suddenly there was a great quaking and both men were knocked from the dinette of the trailer as the makeshift safe house was bowled over, becoming inundated with water.